I'll never forget the first time I heard my grandson whisper, "If Grandma finds out, it'll kill her. Just push it deeper. Hurry, before she wakes up." Those words still echo in my head, as clear as the tick-tock on the old clock in our hallway. It was 1:47 a.m., the kind of quiet, heavy night where the whole house seems to be holding its breath. I'd woken up with that familiar dry mouth I get when I fall asleep with the TV on. My throat felt like sandpaper, so I shuffled out of bed in my worn pink slippers, heading down the hallway for a glass of water. Our old farmhouse creaks and groans like an arthritic man on cold mornings. The floorboards complain with every step, no matter how light you try to be. I placed my hand along the wall, tracing the cracked paint, feeling my way in the dark. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard it. A boy's voice, low and urgent, coming from behind my grandson's bedroom door. "Just push it deeper," he hissed. "It has to go all the way in or it won't work." I froze mid-step. My heart gave a little kick against my ribs. I'm 70 years old, but I know the sound of a scared boy trying to sound brave. I also know the sound of trouble. Another voice, a little higher, shaky, a friend. "Dude, I don't think we should be doing this. What if she wakes up? What if it hurts you again?" "It already hurts," my grandson muttered. "Just do it. Grandma can't find out. She'll freak out, and it'll kill her." I stood there in the dark hallway, my thin cotton nightgown brushing my ankles, fingers pressed into the wallpaper like it could hold me upright. My ears strained for every word, even though a part of me wanted to shut the whole world out right then and there. "Push it deeper. It hurts. Grandma can't find out." Let me back up a minute before I tell you what I did next. My name is Evelyn, but most folks call me Evie. I turned 70 last spring, though some mornings my knees insist I'm closer to 90. I've been a widow for almost 9 years now. My herald went fast. Heart attack in the middle of a Sunday service, right there between Amazing Grace and the offering. He always did have a flair for the dramatic. After he passed, it was just me and the quiet. Then, about 4 years ago, that quiet got blown all to pieces when my daughter Melissa dropped off my grandson, Caleb, with a suitcase, a duffel bag, and eyes so red I thought she might have been crying for a week straight. "Just for a while, Mom," she'd said, voice trembling. "Until I get back on my feet." Well, a while turned into Caleb's junior and now senior year of high school. Melissa's back on her feet never did show up in the mail. Some people are like that, always chasing the next fresh start, never noticing all the burned bridges behind them. So now it's me and Caleb on our little 2-bedroom farmhouse just outside of town. I live on my Social Security check and the modest pension from 35 years working as a receptionist at Dr. Langford's clinic. We've got more love than money, more bills than I care to count, and a whole lot of cornfields for company. Caleb is 17, tall and skinny as a beanpole, with a mop of dark hair that falls into his eyes no matter how many times he pushes it back. He used to be all elbows and laughter, a kid who'd talk your ear off about comic books, video games, and football. Used to. The last few months, something changed. He'd begun losing weight so fast I could see his cheekbones, his jeans hanging off his hips. He was tired all the time, sleeping late, coming home past curfew with dark shadows under his eyes. His teachers called twice about missed assignments. The school nurse called once about him looking a little pale and out of it. Every time I brought it up, he'd shrug it off. "I'm fine, Grandma. Just senior year stress. Everybody's tired. Everybody doesn't look like they're disappearing before your eyes," I wanted to say. But I didn't. I worried. I prayed. I watched. So that night, when I heard those whispers behind his door, "Push it deeper, it hurts, Grandma can't know," my mind went straight to places no grandma wants to go. Drugs, needles, something bad. The thin line of light under his door was the only bright thing in that whole hallway. I stood there in the dark, listening, my heart banging like an old washing machine off balance. There was a rustle, then the sound of plastic crinkling, a small gasp, a low moan that made my stomach twist. "It's burning," Caleb said through clenched teeth. "Just a little more. We have to get it all in." "Dude, your hands are shaking," the other boy said. "What if we mess it up this time?" I pressed my lips together to keep from making a sound. My hand hovered over the doorknob, fingers trembling. What would I even say? "Excuse me, Caleb, But what in God's good name are you doing in there at 2 in the morning? The last thing I wanted was to fling that door open and see my grandson with a needle in his arm, or worse. My brain started listing all the terrifying stories I'd heard at church about good kids gone bad. I thought about the new friends he'd made at school this year, the ones with loud cars and louder music, the way he'd started wearing baggy hoodies even when it was hot outside, the way he'd flinch sometimes when I hugged him too hard, like something hurt under there. I thought about all the times I'd meant to ask more questions and didn't, because I didn't want to nag. How many little signs had I swept under the rug, telling myself, teenagers are just moody? I took a step closer, my bare toes curling against the cool hardwood. Turn it on, Caleb murmured then. Slowly, not all at once this time. Something clicked, an electric whirring sound, faint but clear. Another hiss of air, the sound of liquid moving. My hand dropped from the doorknob. I backed away, every instinct warring inside me. One voice in my head screamed, "Do something, Evie, he's in trouble." Another whispered, "What if you're wrong? What if there's a reasonable explanation? Do you really want to see what's on the other side of that door?" That second voice won, just barely. I tiptoed back to my room, the floorboards sounding like gunshots under my feet. My thirst was gone. My mouth wasn't dry anymore. It was sour with fear. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the closed door, listening to the faint hum down the hall. Sleep didn't come. I watched the red digits on my alarm clock crawl forward. 2:03, 2:27, 3:11. Each minute another chance to drag myself out of bed and march down that hall. Each minute another chance I didn't take. Around 3:30, the house went quiet. A door opened down the hall. Soft footsteps crossed the floor. The bathroom sink ran briefly. Then a toilet flushed. A few moments later, Caleb's door creaked open and shut again. I heard him cough once. A wet, tired sound. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. By the time the first pale light of dawn crept around my curtains, I'd made up my mind about one thing. Whatever my grandson was up to, it wasn't normal. Whether it was drugs or something else, I was going to find out. The kitchen smelled like coffee and vanilla creamer when I finally made my way in around 7:15. I moved slower than usual, my bones stiff from a night without sleep. The old linoleum floor was cool under my feet. The morning air had a little bite to it. Caleb sat at the table in his usual spot, hoodie on despite the mild weather, sleeves tugged down over his hands. His head was bent over a bowl of cereal he clearly wasn't eating. The spoon just chased flakes around in the milk. "Morning, Grandma," he mumbled without looking up. His voice sounded like gravel and smoke. "Morning, baby," I said, forcing cheer into my tone. I walked to the counter, poured myself some coffee, and watched him over the rim of the mug. He looked awful. There's no polite way to say it. His skin had that grayish tint I'd seen too many times in Dr. Langford's waiting room. The faint dark smudges beneath his eyes were even worse this morning, like someone had painted shadows there. "Did you sleep okay?" I asked, stirring my coffee even though I take it the same way every day. "Yeah, fine." He shrugged, eyes still fixed on his bowl like it held all the secrets of the universe. Lie number 1 of the day. I sat down across from him. The chair squeaked the same way it had squeaked under Harold, under my daughter, and now under my grandson. Some things don't change, no matter how much everything else does. "Got a big day at school?" I tried again, keeping my tone light, casual. "Quiz in chemistry," he said, finally picking up his spoon and taking a mechanical bite. "Nothing big." He winced as he swallowed, like even that small effort cost him. "Caleb," I said gently, "look at me, honey." It took him a second, but he finally raised his eyes to mine. For a brief moment, I saw my baby in there. The chubby-faced 6-year-old who used to run down these same hallways yelling about dinosaurs. Then it was gone, replaced by the guarded teenage mask I'd been seeing more and more lately. "Are you messing around with anything you shouldn't be?" I asked carefully. "Substances, vaping, pills, anything like that?" His eyes widened, then narrowed into something like hurt and anger mixed together. "You think I'm getting high?" he shot back, voice cracking slightly. "Seriously, Grandma? I think you're pale. You're tired. You're not eating, and I heard voices in your room at 2 o'clock in the morning saying things that scared me half to death. My voice wobbled, but I kept going. I think I'm your grandmother, and I'm allowed to ask when something feels wrong. He dropped his spoon with a clatter. The cereal milk splashed onto the table. We were just working on something, he muttered, eyes sliding away. At 2 in the morning? I asked, with something that needed to be pushed deeper and turned on slowly. His face flushed a dull red. You were listening? He demanded. Yes, I said simply. Our walls are thin and I care about you. Of course I was listening. For a heartbeat, I saw panic flicker across his features. Then the shutters came down. His jaw clenched, his shoulders hunched. It's not what you think, he muttered. Then what is it? I pushed, softer now. Help me understand. He stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. I'm gonna be late for the bus. Caleb, I said it's not what you think, he snapped, grabbing his backpack. Can we just drop it, please? The please was sharp and desperate, not polite. It stopped me more than the tone did. He leaned against the table for a second, like the simple act of standing had made him dizzy. Then he straightened, slung the backpack over one shoulder, and shuffled toward the door. I watched him go, my heart heavier with each step he took. He paused with his hand on the knob. For just a moment, I thought he might turn back, might say something, might let me in whatever darkness he was carrying alone. Instead, he just said, "Love you, Grandma," without looking at me, and walked out. The screen door banged shut behind him. Yes, if you're new here, listening to this for the first time, you might think, Evie, why didn't you follow him? Why didn't you march into that room the second he left and search every inch of it? Believe me, I asked myself those questions 100 times in the weeks that followed. But that morning, I just stood at the sink, watching my grandson walk down the driveway toward the bus stop, his shoulders slumped, his steps slow. He didn't look like a kid who'd been partying all night. He looked like a kid who'd been fighting for his life. I rinsed his untouched cereal down the drain and decided I was done guessing. If he wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd have to find it myself. I started with the trash can in the hallway bathroom. I'm not proud of it, but at my age, pride is a cheaper sin than regret. The bathroom looked normal enough at first glance. Toothpaste cap off as usual, damp towel on the floor, faint smell of that awful body spray teenage boys insist on bathing in. But the trash can was fuller than it ought to have been for just the two of us. When I'd emptied it the day before, it had been nearly empty. Now it was nearly overflowing. Right on top were a bunch of crumpled paper towels. I picked one up, unfolded it, then quickly folded it back up again as a metallic, sharp smell hit my nose. Blood. Not a nosebleed or scraped knee amount of blood. More than that. Enough to soak through in places. My heart did a funny little skip. I reached deeper, moving aside tissues and an empty shampoo bottle. That's when I found them. Clear plastic wrappers with medical symbols printed on them. A coil of thin, transparent tubing. A small, empty plastic bag with a clamp on one end. My stomach dropped. It didn't look like drug paraphernalia. Not the kind I'd seen in pamphlets at the clinic anyway. It looked medical, like something I'd seen once in a pamphlet about home care. Suddenly, bits and pieces of the last few months floated to the surface of my memory. The day I'd found him sitting on the bathroom floor, pale and sweating, claiming he'd just stood up too fast. The way he guarded his stomach when he bumped into something, flinching like he'd been stabbed. The faint plastic crinkling I sometimes heard at night, like someone opening packaging. The way he always locked his door now, when he used to sleep with it cracked open. I straightened up slowly, my joints protesting. Behind the bathroom mirror, I kept an old shoebox with extra Band-Aids, antibiotic ointment, and the blood pressure cuff I'd bought when my doctor started keeping an eye on things. My hand hovered over it, then moved past. Caleb had started keeping his personal stuff in his bedroom now, saying, "Privacy, Grandma. I'm almost an adult." I tried to respect that. I really did. But there's a line between respecting privacy and ignoring a cry for help. I walked down the hallway, my slippers whispering across the floor, and stopped in front of his door. Locked, of course. I pressed my forehead against the wood, closing my eyes. "Lord," I whispered, "I don't know what to do here, but I know something's wrong. Help me help him, please." When I opened my eyes again, my resolve was fiercer. I went to the kitchen, grabbed the little jar where I keep spare keys, and fished out the one I hoped still worked for Caleb's room. Harold had made it years ago when he first installed the lock, muttering something about teenagers get privacy, but not enough to burn the house down. The key slid in smoother than my conscience. I turned it, heard the soft click, and opened the door. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Not dirty laundry or gym socks that I was used to. This was different. A faint chemical tang, clean but sharp, like rubbing alcohol and plastic. Caleb's room was a mess in the way that teenage boys' rooms often are. Clothes on the floor, unmade bed, half-empty water bottles on the nightstand. But underneath that chaos, there was a new layer. On the top of his dresser sat 3 empty plastic water-gallon jugs, the kind you buy for dispensers. Beside them was a small digital scale, a stack of neatly folded towels, and a bottle of hand sanitizer nearly 3/4 empty. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I walked around to the far side of his bed, where the light from the window didn't quite reach. That's where I saw it. Shoved between the nightstand and the wall, hidden by a draped hoodie, was a black duffel bag I didn't recognize. Not the battered blue one he'd brought with him years ago. This was newer, sturdier. My hands shook a little as I unzipped it. Inside were sealed plastic bags full of clear liquid. Each had a label with numbers and words I didn't understand at first glance. Dianyl, 2.5%, $2,000 malil. There were coils of tubing, shiny connectors, alcohol swabs, surgical masks, disposable gloves, and a smaller clear bag with a coiled line ending in a capped connector that made my breath catch. I'd seen something like this before. Years ago, at the clinic, when Dr. Langford had done a training on chronic kidney disease and home dialysis for some of the nurses. I'd sat in the back, answering phones, half listening as he talked about peritoneal dialysis, about catheters in the abdomen, about patients who could do their treatments at home, instead of coming in for hemodialysis at the hospital 3 times a week. I remembered the pictures he'd shown of thin tubes coming out of people's bellies. I remembered thinking at the time how brave they must be to live like that. Now, standing in my grandson's room, staring at that familiar, terrible equipment, only one thought came to mind. Oh, my sweet Lord, what are you doing, Caleb? My knees gave a little wobble, and I sat heavily on the edge of his bed. The springs squeaked under my weight. Peritoneal dialysis meant one thing, as far as my limited medical knowledge knew: kidney failure. I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heart pounding against my palm. Surely I was jumping to the wrong conclusion. Surely I was overreacting. Surely, if my grandson had kidney failure, someone would have told me. Wouldn't they? I stood up and lifted the edge of his mattress, driven by a sick need to know the whole truth, even if it shattered me. There, taped to the slats underneath, was a folded packet of papers. I peeled it free and unfolded it with fingers that didn't feel like they belonged to me. The first page was a hospital discharge summary. Patient, Caleb Monroe. Diagnosis, end-stage renal disease secondary to chronic glomerulonephritis. Plan, begin peritoneal dialysis training. Follow up with nephrology clinic. Medication list attached. The discharge date was from 3 months ago. 3 months. My hand flew to my mouth. I skimmed the rest, not really seeing the words. Labs, medication doses. Appointment dates, all missed, I realized with a cold jolt when I glanced at the calendar on his wall. Little X marks for random days, nothing circled, nothing written. No one had called our house, no one had said a word. Grandma can't know, he'd whispered. It'll kill her. I sat down again, this time because I thought my legs might give out. My grandson was gravely ill, doing some kind of home dialysis in secret, in the middle of the night, with the help of another teenage boy whose voice shook every time he talked. He was trying to save my feelings, and in the process, risking his life. I pressed the papers to my chest and closed my eyes. All the late-night bathroom trips, the weight loss, the exhaustion, the way he'd snap at me for asking if he was okay, then look guilty. The new water jugs delivered to the porch with no explanation. It all clicked into place with cruel, perfect clarity. He wasn't doing drugs. He was doing dialysis, and he was doing it alone. I don't know how long I sat there, rocking slightly, the papers crinkling under my fingers, long enough for my coffee in the kitchen to grow cold, long enough for the sound of the school bus's distant engine to fade from the road outside. Eventually, I opened my eyes and forced myself to breathe big, slow breaths. One thing living 70 years will teach you is this: panic never solved a problem, but it sure knows how to make one bigger. I smoothed the hospital papers back out and read more carefully this time. There, buried in the medical jargon, was the name of his nephrologist, an appointment date he'd missed, a list of medications I had never seen in our kitchen cabinet. There was also a section on caregiver education. I stared at those words until they blurred. Caleb hadn't just been discharged to do this on his own. Someone had expected a caregiver, a parent, a responsible adult. He'd come home to me, and instead of telling me, he'd locked his door and started sneaking around at 2 a.m, trying to act like nothing in our world had changed. I thought my heart had broken the day my daughter left him on my porch and drove away. Turns out, it could still crack in new places. I stood up slowly, every joint protesting, and carefully put everything back exactly where I'd found it. The duffel bag zipped, the papers taped back under the mattress, the door locked behind me. Not because I planned to pretend I didn't know. No, because if there was one thing I understood now, it was this: whatever came next, I had to be smart. I had to be calm. I had to be the grown-up. My grandson was drowning in something way too big for a 17-year-old boy to carry alone. He might think he was protecting me, but it was time someone finally protected him. That afternoon, when the bus dropped him off, I was waiting on the front porch, coffee cup in hand, heart pounding under my cardigan like a guilty child caught with her hand in the cookie jar, even though I wasn't the one keeping life or death secrets. "Hey, Grandma," Caleb said, hitching his backpack higher on his shoulder. The late afternoon sun made his skin look even paler, if that was possible. "You okay? You're out here kinda early. We need to talk," I said quietly. He froze at the bottom of the steps. His eyes flicked from my face to the tightly gripped coffee mug, back to my face. I saw it, the exact moment he realized something was different. I set the mug down on the porch railing with a little clink. "Inside," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now." For a split second, I saw something almost like a flinch. Then he took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and climbed the steps. He walked past me into the house, smelling faintly of sweat, school hallway, and that chemical tang I'd started to recognize. He dropped his backpack by the door and turned to face me in the living room. I closed the door behind us and leaned against it, suddenly more tired than I could ever remember being. "I went into your room today," I said. His whole body stiffened. "I used the spare key," I went on. "I saw the bag, the fluid, the tubing. I found the hospital papers under your mattress." His face drained of what little color it had left. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other. 17 years old and 70. Both of us caught in a web of secrets neither of us had made, but both of us had helped keep. Silence stretched between us, taut and thin. Then very softly, so soft I almost missed it, he whispered, "I didn't want you to find out like this." His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment he looked so young, so unbearably young, that my heart squeezed in my chest. 17 or not, he was still my boy, my baby, the child I'd bathed in the kitchen sink and rocked through thunderstorms. "Caleb," I whispered, stepping toward him. But he lifted a hand, stopping me cold, not out of anger, out of fear. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he said, eyes glistening. "I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want you to worry." "Honey," I said, taking another step, "I'm your grandmother. Worrying is literally my job description." He let out a sound that was halfway between a shaky laugh and a sob. His shoulders slumped, and all the fight drained out of him. I was gonna tell you," he murmured. "Just not yet." "When, baby?" I asked gently. "When you collapsed? When you got an infection? When it was too late?" He swallowed hard, and that's when I saw it. A tiny wince, a soft pressing of his palm against the lower right side of his stomach. My eyes narrowed. "Caleb," I said softly, "lift your shirt." His eyes flew wide. "Grandma, now." He hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly lifted the hem of his hoodie. That's when I saw it. A small plastic catheter tube, no thicker than a coffee stirrer, emerged from a dressing taped low on his abdomen. The connector, small, capped, sterile-looking, rested just above his waistband. I pressed a hand against my mouth. "Oh, baby." He flinched and quickly pulled his hoodie back down. "Does it hurt?" I whispered. "Only when I'm doing the exchange," he murmured. "Or if I move wrong, or sometimes when I breathe too hard, or cough." "Cough?" I repeated sharply. "You're coughing?" He nodded weakly. "It's nothing. Just from—" "Don't say just," I cut in firmly. "Not tonight." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of months of secrets pressing between us like a third person in the room. "Sit," I said, pointing to the couch. He sank onto it, shoulders hunched, fingers worrying the hem of his sleeve. I sat beside him, close enough that our knees touched, but not close enough to crowd him. I wasn't sure who was trembling more, my hands or his. "Start at the beginning," I said gently. "Tell me everything." He took a long, shaky breath, and then the dam burst. "The Caleb story, everything he hid. It started last year," he said quietly. "I was getting tired a lot, dizzy sometimes. I thought it was just, I don't know, growing or something. Why didn't you tell me?" He gave a helpless little shrug. "I didn't want to make things harder for you. You already do so much. And Mom," his voice trailed off. I didn't press. We both knew Melissa wasn't exactly the call and check-in type. Then it got worse. My ankles swelled up. I started throwing up in the mornings. I thought it was a stomach bug, but it didn't go away. My hands tightened on my knees. "I went to the school nurse," he continued, "and she checked my blood pressure. It was super high. She called Mom, and Mom took me to the ER a couple towns over." My jaw clenched. Melissa had never mentioned one word of this. "They did labs," he said. "Put in an IV. And then they told me—" His eyes filled again. "They told me my kidneys were failing, like almost totally gone." "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered. "I had no idea," he said, voice breaking. "They asked if anyone in my family had kidney problems, so Mom told them about my dad." My stomach twisted. Caleb's father had died at 22 from kidney complications. No one had ever told the boy the details. "They admitted me," Caleb continued. "Said I had end-stage renal something. I didn't understand half of it. They said I'd need dialysis, maybe a transplant, maybe both." He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Mom freaked out. She said she couldn't afford the treatments. She asked them if there was some kind of payment plan or something. They said they'd try to help, but—" My jaw clenched again, harder this time. "She dropped me off here 2 days later," he whispered. "Said she'd be back after she sorted everything out." But she never came back, Grandma." He looked down, twisting his fingers. "She left me with the paperwork and the supplies they gave us. They said she needed to attend training with me, but Mom said she didn't have time. She told me I could handle it myself, that I was grown enough." My blood ran cold. I covered my mouth with my hand, tears stinging my eyes. "And you just started doing this alone?" I whispered. "For months?" He nodded. "I read the booklet, watched videos online. And Mateo, he's my friend. His aunt did dialysis at home, so he knew a little. He tried to help, but he's 16, I said softly. He nodded again, wiping his eyes. "I didn't want to tell you," he whispered. "I didn't want to be a burden. You already take care of everything. You're old. Watch it," I snapped, though my voice was soft and watery. He cracked a tiny, guilty smile. "I mean, you shouldn't have to take this on. And I knew you'd worry. I knew you'd try to fix everything. And I didn't want to make you sad. You've already lost so much." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. "Caleb," I whispered, "you are not a burden. You are my grandson, my family, my heart. You tell me if your shoelace is too tight. You think you can hide kidney failure from me?" He swallowed, shoulders shaking. "I just didn't want you to hurt," he whispered. "Oh, baby," I said, pulling him into my arms. "You can't protect me by killing yourself." He cried into my shoulder, quiet, hitching sobs, like a little boy crying over a scraped knee. But this scrape could take his life. After a long minute, he pulled away, rubbing at his face. "So? What now?" he asked, sounding younger than I'd heard in years. Now. The words sat heavy in the air. Because the truth was, despite all my grandmotherly bravado, I didn't know what came next. Not really. Not yet. But I knew one thing. We're going to fix this, I said firmly. Together. His bottom lip trembled. Grandma. No arguments, I said, wiping his face with the sleeve of my cardigan. You're not doing another treatment alone. You're not missing another appointment. And you're not hiding a single thing from me ever again. He nodded slowly. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Good, I said, standing up. Now go lie down. You look like death warmed over. He stood too, swaying slightly. I reached out instinctively. My hand caught his arm before he could fall. Caleb? I'm fine, he muttered weakly, but the words were limp. He wasn't fine, not even close. Something inside me snapped into gear then. Not fear, not panic, but the old familiar iron backbone I'd relied on during every hard moment of my life. Get your shoes off, I said. Put your feet up. I'm calling the clinic. And then tomorrow morning, we're going to the hospital. His eyes widened with fear. No hospital. Yes, hospital. But no. But Grandma. I pressed a finger to his lips. Hush. You've done enough hiding, enough hurting, enough pretending. He swallowed hard. We're not waiting until something forces us, I added quietly. Grandma, he whispered. I don't feel too good. I stepped closer. What hurts? He pressed a hand to his abdomen again. It feels hot and tight, and I've been throwing up again. And I can't. He trailed off, breathing unevenly. Worry stabbed through me like a knife. How long? I demanded. A couple days, he whispered. Maybe a week. A week? Caleb! I didn't want to scare you. I closed my eyes. Honey, you are actively scaring me more by not telling me. He hunched over a little. It burns, he whispered. I pulled his hoodie up before he could protest and peeled back the corner of the dressing. The skin around the catheter was angry and red, hot to the touch, and the slightest pressure made him hiss in pain. My heart dropped into my stomach. That wasn't normal irritation. That was infection. A deep one. A dangerous one. And if it spread inside, if it reached his bloodstream, no. I couldn't even let myself finish the thought. We're going, I said sharply. Where? To the hospital, now. But no. But Grandma, no. But we don't have money. I don't care. But they'll keep me. Good. But what about school? School will still be there when you're alive to attend it. But I grabbed his face gently between my hands. Caleb Monroe, I said quietly, if we don't go right now, we might not get another chance. His eyes widened, and behind the fear, behind the exhaustion, behind months of secrecy and pain, I saw the truth. He knew. He'd known for days. He was getting worse, and he'd been hoping he could hide it until he couldn't hide anything at all. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Grandma. His knees buckled a little. I caught him again. Sit, I said, voice trembling. I'll get the keys. I found my keys on the little dish by the front door, the same one Harold used to toss his change into every evening, and I swear my hands shook so badly I could barely pick them up. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then turned back toward Caleb. He looked so small sitting on the couch. He wasn't a little boy anymore. He was nearly 6 feet tall. But in that moment, hunched over, holding his stomach, pale as linen and sweating through his hoodie, he looked like a child again. My child. He tried to stand when I reached him, but his legs buckled almost instantly. I got you, I murmured, wrapping an arm around his waist. Lean on me, baby. We shuffled toward the door. He was trembling, not from cold, but from pain. His breath hitched with each step. Grandma, he whispered. I'm right here, I said. No, I don't want to die. My heart cracked clean in half. You're not dying, I said firmly, even though a cold fear was crawling up my spine. Not on my watch. His weight sagged against me. It hurts, Grandma. I know, honey, I know. We're going right now. The getting him into the car outside. The late afternoon sun had already begun its slow descent behind the line of maple trees by the road. The air was crisp, that early fall bite that gets into your bones if you stand in it too long. I opened the passenger door of my old Buick, the same one that had carried Caleb home from kindergarten, the same one that had carried Harold to dialysis, and eased him into the seat. He winced loudly. Sorry, baby, I whispered. Almost done. He leaned his head back, breathing unevenly. His skin had that too shiny look, clammy and feverish. I reached out, brushing a cool hand across his forehead. Burning. Oh God, burning hot. That wasn't just fever. That was infection. A deep one. I shut the door carefully, then hurried around the car. My hands fumbled with the seatbelt until it clicked in place. As I pulled out of the driveway, gravel crunching under my tires, Caleb's voice came soft and rasping. "Don't call Mom." I glanced sideways. His eyes were half open, glazed. "We'll deal with your mother later," I said. "Right now, we deal with you. She'll freak out. She can freak out all she wants, after we save your life." He didn't argue again. Matsos samstuam the drive. The hospital was 22 minutes away under normal circumstances. That night, it felt like 20 miles of panic stretched into eternity. Every red light somehow turned green before I reached it. Every slow tractor on the road turned off just before blocking my lane. God himself might have been clearing the way. Every few minutes, I reached over and touched Caleb's knee just to make sure he was still conscious. "Still with me, baby?" "Yeah." His voice was thin, just tired. His head lolled to the side. "Stay awake for me," I said urgently. "I'm trying." When we reached the long stretch past Miller's farm, the one with nothing but fields on both sides, I heard it. A sharp, wet cough, then another, then a little groan. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Caleb? Talk to me." He didn't answer. "Caleb!" His head slumped forward, chin hitting his chest. I slammed the car to the shoulder, tires spitting gravel. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped the gear shift. I leaned across the seat and shook him gently. "Caleb, baby, wake up." His eyelids fluttered. He whispered something I couldn't hear. "Sweetheart, you stay with me. Look at me." Slowly, so slowly his lashes cast shadows across his cheeks, he opened his eyes. "Grandma, it hurts. Everything hurts." "I know, honey," I said, tears blurring my vision. "We're almost there. Just a few more minutes." He tried to nod, but even that seemed too much. I put the car back in drive, checked the mirror, and eased back onto the road. The last 6 minutes of the drive were the longest of my life. Arriving at the ER, when the hospital finally came into view, all lit up against the darkening sky, I nearly sobbed in relief. I pulled up to the emergency entrance and parked crooked, half in a space, half maybe in a fire lane. I didn't care. An older couple coming out of the sliding doors jumped when they saw me yank open the passenger door. "Help!" I yelled before I even realized I was shouting. "Please, someone help!" A security guard rushed over. "What's wrong, ma'am?" "My grandson," I gasped, gesturing frantically. He's sick. He has a catheter. He does dialysis at home. He's got a fever. He passed out. Please, he needs help." The guard waved toward the doors. "Let's get him inside." Together, though my arms felt weak as wet twine, we got Caleb out of the seat. His head lolled against my shoulder. His feet barely touched the ground. "Caleb, sweetheart," I whispered, tapping his cheek lightly. "We're here. You're safe now." He didn't respond. We dragged him through the automatic doors. The nurse at the desk took one look at his color and stood up so fast her chair rolled back into the wall. "Room 3, she called. "Now!" They whisked us into a curtained-off room. A second nurse appeared with a blood pressure cuff and pulse oximeter. The numbers popped up. The nurse's expression darkened. "BP 86/54, she said sharply. "Pulse 142. "Temp?" another nurse asked. She placed the thermometer. It beeped almost immediately. 39.9 Celsius. That's 103.8 Fahrenheit. She translated for my sake. I gasped. The first nurse looked right at me. "He's septic." The world tilted. My stomach bottomed out. For a second, sound went fuzzy. Septic. Just like Harold had been before he died. "No, not Caleb. Please, God, no." "We need an IV stat," the nurse barked. "Get Dr. Patel, now." I stumbled backward, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself. "Grandma," Caleb whispered. His voice was barely audible. I rushed back to his side. "I'm here," I whispered urgently. "I'm right here." "It's cold," he breathed. "It's the fever, sweetheart. They're gonna fix you." "Grandma, I'm scared." I took his warm, too warm, hand between both of mine. "You don't have to be scared anymore," I said, even though fear was clawing up my throat. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. The doctor arrives. A woman in scrubs and a white coat rushed in. Caleb Monroe? She asked, already pulling on gloves. I'm Dr. Patel. What happened? The nurse answered for me. 17-year-old male, end-stage renal disease on home peritoneal dialysis, high fever, hypotensive, tachycardic, suspected peritonitis. Peritonitis. I'd seen that word on the pamphlets once. It had a skull and crossbones feeling even on paper. Dr. Patel lifted his shirt, examined the catheter site, and inhaled sharply. Get cultures. Start broad-spectrum IV antibiotics, vancomycin and cefepime, and get fluids running, 2 liters NS, wide open. The nurses moved in fast like a well-trained storm. Needles, tubing, machines beeping, bags hung on poles. My head spun. Ma'am, Dr. Patel said gently, turning to me. Is Caleb's legal guardian present? That's me, I said. Okay. She softened. He's very sick. But you got him here in time. We're going to do everything we can. My breath hitched. Is he going to die? She hesitated for just the tiniest fraction of a second, and I knew. She didn't know yet. We're fighting for him, she said. That's what I can tell you. He's young. He has a good chance if we stabilize him. If. I clung to that word like a life raft. Stay. As they worked on him, Caleb drifted in and out of consciousness. At one point he murmured, I'm sorry, Grandma. Didn't want you to worry. I smoothed his hair with trembling fingers. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered. I'd rather worry every day of my life than lose you. His eyelashes fluttered. Don't cry. Too late, I said softly. A tear slipped off my chin and landed on his hand. His fingers twitched, trying to curl around mine, but they were too weak. The room buzzed with medical voices. BP's rising, 94/60. Good response to fluids. Cultures drawn. Starting antibiotics. He's breathing too fast. Might need nasal cannula. He's a strong kid. Let's keep pushing. I just stood there, praying silently over and over. Please God, please God, please God. Don't take my baby, not like this. Not now, please. The phone call. About 30 minutes later, Dr. Patel stepped out to update the charge nurse. I followed her, wiping my face. Doctor, I whispered, do I need to call his mother? Dr. Patel exhaled slowly. Do you have a good relationship with his mother? No, I said honestly. But she's his mother. Then yes, she said, but prepare yourself. She may be overwhelmed or angry or scared. I nodded. I stepped into the hallway with my phone, hands shaking. I stared at Melissa's name on the screen for a long moment. Then I pressed call. It rang 5 times before she answered. What's up? She said, sounding distracted. Melissa. My voice shook. It's your son. Silence. Then, what happened now? My eyes filled. He's in the hospital. He's very sick. Melissa interrupted with a groan. Oh God, Mom. Are you serious? I'm in the middle of something right now. He has sepsis, I snapped. He could die. Silence. Then, I'll come when I can. I almost dropped the phone. When you can, I repeated, outraged. Melissa, your son is fighting for his life. I know, she snapped back, sounding panicked. I just need to figure something out first, okay? I'll get there. Just keep me posted. She hung up. I stared at the phone, furious and heartbroken. But right now, anger didn't matter. Saving Caleb did. I went back into the room. He was still breathing fast, still pale and sweating, but he was alive. Alive. I sat back down beside him and took his hand again. I'm here, baby, I whispered. I'm not going anywhere. The hours that followed felt like a strange kind of dream, one where everything moves too fast and too slow at the same time. Nurses buzzed in and out of the room like determined bees. Machines beeped, plastic rustled, lights flickered. Someone placed a warmed blanket over Caleb's shaking body. Another nurse inserted a second IV line. A third attached monitor leads across his chest. And through it all, Caleb drifted at the edge of consciousness. Eyes half open, half closed, lips moving with half-formed words I couldn't hear. Every so often he whispered my name. "Grandma, I'm here," I whispered back every time. "Right here." But the truth was, part of me wasn't in that room at all. Part of me was back in the hallway, watching Harold's stretcher being wheeled away years ago. Back in the echo of those fluorescent-lit nights after his dialysis complications. Back in that cold, metallic fear that swallows the whole world when someone you love is dying right in front of you. A nurse with kind eyes stepped toward me. "Ma'am, we're going to move him to the ICU," she said gently. "He's responding to the fluids, but his blood pressure is still unstable. We need to monitor him closely." ICU. Those letters punched the air from my lungs. Is he going to need machines?" I whispered. "Like a ventilator?" "We don't know yet," the nurse said. "But we're going to do everything we can to prevent that." She touched my arm, warm, firm, steadying. "You did the right thing bringing him in when you did." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. "When can I see him after they move him?" I asked. "As soon as he's settled," she said. "You can go with the transport team now, if you'd like." "Of course," I said. "I'm not leaving him." The team wheeled Caleb's stretcher out of the ER room. I walked beside him, gripping the metal railing as though letting go would make him slip away. His head had turned slightly toward me, his eyelids fluttering. I leaned closer. "You're doing so good, sweetheart," I whispered. "Just hang on a little longer." He breathed out something that sounded like, "Grandma, sorry." I shook my head firmly. "No more sorries," I murmured. We passed doors, curtains, nurses' stations, people staring with tired eyes. Every breath felt like a prayer. When the elevator doors opened with a soft ding, they wheeled him inside. The fluorescent lights above us flickered slightly. A tiny, ordinary thing. But in that moment, it felt like the whole world was trembling with me. The elevator jerked upward. A nurse inside pressed a button and looked at me. "Septic shock is scary," she said quietly. "But he's young, and his body's fighting." "Is it enough?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "We hope so," she said. "Young patients have a lot of reserve, but peritonitis, it can be aggressive." There was no comfort in her tone, just honesty. The elevator stopped. The doors opened to a quieter, colder hallway. Soft beeping sounds drifting from behind closed doors, nurses speaking in hushed tones. The ICU, Unit 3, a place where people fought their hardest battles. They wheeled him into a glass-walled room with machines already waiting. A monitor screen flickered alive as they connected cables. Numbers popped up. Alarms chirped. Pulse 138. Blood pressure 92/58. Oxygen 90%. Too low, too fast, too unstable. A respiratory therapist slipped in and placed a nasal cannula under his nose. "There," she said softly. "A little extra oxygen to help you, buddy." Caleb didn't respond. A nurse adjusted the IV rate. Another hung a new antibiotic bag. Another placed a warm blanket over him. I stood there feeling utterly useless, like a ghost made of fear and trembling bones. After 20 minutes, Dr. Patel came in. She checked his abdomen again, gently pressing around the catheter. Caleb winced, even in his semi-conscious state. Her lips tightened. "Is it peritonitis?" I whispered. "Yes," she said quietly. "A severe case." My heart stuttered. "How severe?" I forced out. She pulled a small stool over and sat beside me. "Peritonitis in a peritoneal dialysis patient can spread very fast," she said. "Sometimes within hours. The abdominal cavity can become overwhelmed. The infection can enter the bloodstream. When that happens, it causes septic shock. Like what Harold had," I whispered. Dr. Patel paused. "Yes," she said softly. "Like that." I closed my eyes. "But," she continued, "Caleb is not an older adult. He's young, strong, and he has something your husband didn't." She placed a hand over mine. "We caught it early enough to treat. These antibiotics are extremely powerful. He has a very real chance." A chance. Not a guarantee. Not a promise. A chance. I clung to it anyway. About 2 hours later, while I sat beside Caleb's bed watching the rise and fall of his chest, the door to the ICU waiting area swung open. Melissa. She looked the same as the last time I saw her. Pretty, messy hair pulled into a bun, makeup smudged like she'd slept in it, cheap purse slung over her shoulder. but there was something different in her eyes. Fear. Real, raw fear. She spotted me immediately. "Mom!" she hissed, storming across the room. "Why didn't you call sooner?" "I did," I said, exhausted. "You said you'd come when you could." She flushed, but her eyes darted toward the glass wall of Caleb's room. What happened to him? Is he okay? Melissa, what is all that?" she snapped, pointing at the tubes. "What is he hooked up to? Why is he in ICU? Melissa, and why the hell didn't anyone tell me he had kidney failure? Or that he was doing dialysis?" I stared at her. Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" I whispered slowly. "No one told you." I mean," she swallowed. "I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think it was like that." A hot spark of anger lit in my chest. "You left him," I said bluntly. "You left him with paperwork and supplies and told him he'd figure it out. I didn't know he'd have to do it alone," she burst out, eyes filling. "The hospital, they said, I thought they'd call, or someone." "Melissa," I said, voice trembling. "He almost died." She covered her face with both hands and sobbed. I didn't comfort her. Not yet. Not now. Not when my grandson lay fighting for his life because she couldn't sit still long enough to attend a single medical training. She dropped her hands and stared at Caleb through the glass. "Can I go in?" she whispered. "Only 2 at a time," I said. "You can sit with him. I'll step out." Her chin trembled. "Mom," she whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't know, I swear. I didn't know it was this bad." I nodded once. "Go," I said quietly. "He needs you." She slipped inside the room, moving timidly toward the bed. I sank into a chair in the hallway, staring down at my hands. They shook uncontrollably. A nurse walked by and paused. "Can I get you some water?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to speak. When she returned and handed me a cup, she knelt beside me. "You're doing really well," she said softly. "Family support helps patients more than you can imagine." I stared at her through tears. "I just want him to live," I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "We're fighting for him," she said. "All of us." About 40 minutes later, just when I thought my heart couldn't break any further, I heard it. A long, continuous beep from inside Caleb's room. Not the soft beeps of his monitor. A loud one. The kind that freezes you solid. The kind you never forget. A nurse sprinted past me, pushing open his door. "Get Patel, now!" My blood went cold. I stumbled to my feet. Through the glass wall, I saw Caleb's body arch slightly, his chest rising and falling unnaturally. Alarms blaring. Melissa shouting his name. A doctor rushed in. Another nurse pushed me back. "Ma'am, you need to stay outside." "That's my grandson," I cried. "We need room to work. Please, stay here." I pressed both hands against the glass as the room filled with bodies in scrubs. Melissa was sobbing uncontrollably, clutching Caleb's hand. They pushed her gently aside. I couldn't hear their words, but I could read lips. His pressure's dropping. He's crashing. Start another bolus. Check his airway. Prepare to intubate. He's not breathing well. Move, move, move! My breath stuttered out in short, panicked bursts. "Please, God, please, please," I whispered, forehead pressed to the glass. The world shook. My knees gave out. A nurse caught me before I hit the floor. Lights blurred, voices blurred. Only one thing stayed clear. My grandson's limp hand falling off the bed rail. The hallway spun when Caleb's hand slipped off the bed rail, and for a moment I thought I was going to faint right there on the ICU floor, but I forced myself to stay upright because collapsing wouldn't help him. Collapsing wouldn't save him. Collapsing wouldn't bring him back if he slipped away for good. Through the glass wall, I watched doctors and nurses crowd around him like a storm of blue and white, their voices urgent, their movements sharp, and I could feel the panic clawing up my throat because I knew that scene too well. The sudden rush, the crash carts, the alarms, the desperate energy of people fighting to pull someone back from the edge. I'd seen it once before with Harold, and the thought that it might be happening again to my grandson felt like someone was crushing my chest with their bare hands. I pressed my palms flat against the cold glass, my breath fogging it, my voice barely a whisper as I begged the universe not to take him. Not now. Not like this. A nurse held my shoulders to steady me, but I barely registered her touch. My whole world was inside that room, fighting for breath. Caleb's body jerked slightly as a doctor manipulated his airway. And then another nurse tilted his head while someone else cut open the front of his gown to place more monitoring leads. I saw Melissa in the corner, crying so hard her entire body shook, her hands covering her mouth as if she could hold in the sound of her own grief. I couldn't hear anything through the glass, but I saw their lips moving, the clipped commands, the tense urgency, the swift coordination of people working against the clock. Then I saw Dr. Patel step forward, her face set with grim focus as she prepared a laryngoscope. They were going to intubate him. My grandson, my sweet boy who used to curl up in my lap during thunderstorms, who used to ask for one more story before bed, who used to chase fireflies in the backyard, lay limp and pale, his chest rising only with the help of hands guiding the breaths into his lungs. My knees buckled again, but I refused to fall. "Come on, baby," I whispered against the glass. "Fight, you fight." A nurse inside squeezed a bag valve mask, forcing air into his lungs, and for a moment, everything slowed, like the world was holding its breath alongside him. His chest rose, fell, rose again. The monitor beeped in uneven rhythms that made my heart stop and stutter. Then I saw Dr. Patel insert the tube. Her movements were steady, practiced, but the tension in her jaw told me everything. This was serious, this was dangerous, this was life or death. The tube slid in, someone secured it, another nurse connected it to the ventilator, and the machine hissed to life with a rhythmic mechanical sigh. The beeps steadied, just a little, but enough that I realized I'd been holding my breath until dots danced in my vision. Inside, Melissa clung to the bedrail now, her forehead pressed against Caleb's arm, crying into the scratchy hospital sheet. A nurse gently pulled her back to give the medical team space, but Melissa fought to stay close until another nurse wrapped an arm around her and guided her toward the corner, speaking softly. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. I couldn't think beyond the sound of that ventilator pushing breath after breath into my grandson's fragile, exhausted body. After what felt like an eternity, but could only have been a few minutes, the flurry of movement slowed. The urgency settled into a quieter, controlled intensity. The team backed away one by one, leaving Dr. Patel at his bedside as she checked the tube placement, listened to his lungs, and murmured instructions to a nurse charting everything at lightning speed. Finally, she stepped out of the room, pulling off her gloves, and spotted me standing there like a ghost about to crumble. She walked over slowly, her face soft with empathy, but edged with the kind of seriousness that made my stomach drop. "He's stable for now," she said, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek at the words "for now." We had to intubate him because he wasn't breathing adequately on his own. The infection caused his blood pressure to crash, and his body couldn't compensate anymore. Is he dying?" I whispered. She hesitated just a breath, and that pause nearly broke me. "He's critically ill," she said gently. "But he's young. That's in his favor. His response to the fluids and antibiotics is improving. The ventilator is helping him rest." My chest shuddered as I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "He can come back from this," she continued. "But the next 24 to 48 hours are very important. We need to see his body respond. We need to see the infection markers come down." I nodded, even though my vision blurred with tears. "I want to see him," I whispered. She nodded and opened the door for me. The room smelled like antiseptic, warm blankets, and something faintly metallic. The machine hissed steadily beside him as it pushed breath after breath into his lungs. I approached slowly, afraid to touch him, afraid he'd vanish if I made a wrong move. His eyes were closed now, lashes resting lightly on his cheeks, and there was a faint pink flush across his face from the fever still burning through him. His dark hair was damp with sweat. His lips were dry and cracked. My boy, my sweet boy. I reached out and wrapped my fingers around his hand, careful not to disturb the IV that snaked from the back of it. His skin was warm, too warm, but there was life in that warmth. "Grandma's here," I murmured, my voice shaking. "You're not alone, honey. You're not alone." Behind me, I could hear Melissa crying softly, repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." under her breath like a prayer or a confession. For a long time I said nothing, because words felt too small for the moment. I just held his hand and listened to the ventilator breathe for him. At some point, a nurse came in and checked his vitals, adjusting the drip rates, making notes, and she gave me a small, encouraging smile before slipping out again. Hours passed. Maybe 2, maybe 3. Time didn't make sense in rooms like this. It stretched, it buckled, it tangled around the beeping of machines and the rise and fall of his chest. Eventually, Dr. Patel returned with new labs. She stood at the foot of the bed, studying the chart, her brow furrowing with concentration. "His white blood cell count is still high," she murmured, half to herself. "But his lactate is trending down. That's good. And his pressure is responding to the fluids." I swallowed hard, clinging to every word. "Is he going to wake up?" I asked. She softened her gaze. "Not yet. We're keeping him sedated while his body fights off the infection. When it's safer, we'll begin to lighten the sedation." I nodded slowly. "He's strong," I whispered. "He is," she agreed, "but he's been doing dialysis alone. For a long time." Shame and anger burned in my chest. "He shouldn't have been alone," I said. "No," she said gently. "He shouldn't have." I leaned closer to him, brushing a damp curl from his forehead. "You're not alone anymore," I whispered. "Not ever again." The night deepened outside the ICU windows, the quiet hum of machines filling the space between my breaths. Nurses changed shifts. Melissa dozed fitfully in a chair, her hands still trembling even in sleep. And through it all, I stayed awake, watching the rise and fall of Caleb's chest, counting each breath like it was the only thing keeping me alive. Because maybe it was. The night inside that ICU felt endless, like time itself had stretched thin over the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. Each hiss a reminder that my grandson was alive, but only because a machine was breathing for him. The sedative kept him still, his face soft and strangely peaceful, despite the tiny twitches of pain that occasionally passed over his brow. I kept my fingers wrapped around his hand, afraid that if I let go, even for a second, the universe might decide it didn't need him anymore. Hours slipped by in a slow, trembling crawl. Nurses came and went, adjusting tubes, checking vitals, scribbling numbers on charts that might as well have been ancient hieroglyphics for all I understood them. I didn't need to understand the numbers, though. I just needed to watch the rise and fall of Caleb's chest and pray it would continue long enough for the antibiotics to win. At some point, Melissa returned from the hallway bathroom with her eyes red and puffy, mascara smudged down her cheeks like ink that had run in the rain. She sank into the chair across from me, looking so small despite being a grown woman of 37. Her voice shook when she finally spoke. "Mom, I really didn't know it was this bad." I didn't answer right away because the anger inside me hadn't cooled. It had settled like hot coals under a thin layer of ashes. I didn't look at her until I could speak without shouting. "You knew he was sick," I said quietly. "You knew the doctor said he needed care." She wrapped her arms around herself like she was suddenly freezing. I thought he was exaggerating. He didn't look this bad before. And the hospital bills? I panicked. I stared at her for a long moment. "You're his mother." She winced and nodded, tears welling again. "I know. I messed up. I know I did. I didn't know how to fix it." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I thought you'd be better at this than me. You always were." I wanted to tell her that motherhood isn't something you outsource when it gets too hard. That loving a child means showing up even when you're scared, even when you're drowning, even when the bills pile up and the future looks like a cliff. But Caleb lay between us, fighting for his life, and this wasn't the moment to break his mother apart even more. I closed my eyes and let the anger sit quietly in the corner of my heart, a guest I'd deal with later. When I opened them, Melissa was staring at Caleb with a look I hadn't seen on her face since she first laid eyes on him as a newborn. Fear, awe, and a fierce kind of love tangled into something raw and honest. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, her fingers trembling. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered to him, not to me. "I should have been here. I should have been better." Her voice cracked, and she covered her mouth with both hands as a sob shook her shoulders. For the first time that night, I didn't feel only anger. I felt pity, grief, a terrible understanding of how fear can turn people into cowards. She stayed like that, crying silently while Caleb slept under sedation, until a nurse came in to check his vitals again. The nurse's face softened as she looked at us. "His pressure is improving," she murmured. "Not perfect yet, but better than earlier." A breath I didn't know I'd been holding slipped out of me. "And his oxygen levels? His everything?" She nodded. "Stable. Still critical, but stable. That's good." The words "still critical" were a punch to the gut, but stable was a lifeline, a rope thrown into a storm. When the nurse left, the room fell quiet again except for the faint hum of machines. Hours crawled by, one beeping monitor at a time. Somewhere around dawn, when the sky outside the ICU windows was just beginning to blush with pale blue, Caleb stirred. It was small, just his fingers twitching around mine, but it was enough that my breath caught in my throat. "Caleb?" I whispered, leaning forward. He didn't open his eyes. The sedation was too strong for that. But another little movement rippled through his hand, and this time his lips parted ever so slightly. A tiny sound escaped him. Melissa jolted awake, sitting upright in the chair with a gasp. "Is he waking up?" "Not yet," I murmured. "But he's here. He's still here." Tears blurred my vision again, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from something that felt like hope, cautiously peeking through the cracks. A few minutes later, Dr. Patel stepped in, her hair pulled back, her face looking tired but calm. She checked Caleb's chart, listened to his lungs, pressed gently on his abdomen, and finally straightened with a slow nod. "He's stable enough that we might begin reducing the sedation later today," she said softly. "We'll take it slow." "We want him conscious but not in pain." My hand trembled against Caleb's. Melissa let out a soft cry of relief, pressing a hand over her heart. Is he safe now?" she whispered. Dr. Patel hesitated. "He's safer," she corrected gently. "But he's not out of the woods. The infection was severe. We need to see improvement in his labs. We need to see his body respond. But he has a fighting chance." Fighting chance. Those words wrapped themselves around my heart like a warm blanket. When the doctor left, I leaned close to Caleb again, brushing my thumb over his knuckles. "You hear that, baby?" I whispered. "You're fighting. And you're winning." His hand twitched again, faint but real. Melissa leaned against the wall, covering her face as silent tears streamed between her fingers. Morning light spilled softly into the room, painting everything with a gentle brightness that made the machines and tubes look less frightening, less like instruments of war and more like tools of healing. I took a deep breath, the first full breath I'd taken since those awful seconds when he crashed. Caleb was alive. He was stable. He was still here. And as long as he was here, I wasn't going anywhere. Morning slowly melted into afternoon in the ICU, sunlight blurring across the glass walls in soft streaks as machines kept their steady mechanical rhythm beside Caleb's bed. The antibiotics dripped into his veins with a quiet persistence, the ventilator breathing for him in calm, even sighs that filled the room like a strange, fragile lullaby. Melissa had fallen asleep again, curled in the corner with her knees pulled to her chest, exhaustion painting shadows under her eyes. I didn't sleep, not really. I just sat with Caleb's hand in mine, whispering to him every now and then, telling him he was strong, telling him he was loved, telling him he wasn't allowed to leave me. Somewhere around mid-afternoon, Dr. Patel returned with updated labs. Her voice was soft but steady when she spoke. "His numbers are improving. Slowly, but they are improving. The infection markers are down. Blood pressure is stabilizing. Lactate continues to fall." I closed my eyes as a wave of gratitude washed over me. Melissa let out a trembled breath. "Does that mean he'll live?" she whispered. "It means," Dr. Patel said carefully, "that he's responding to treatment. And that is exactly what we want to see right now." Hope bloomed in my chest, small but bright. She adjusted the ventilator settings, then nodded. "In a few more hours, we'll begin reducing the sedation." I squeezed Caleb's hand. "You hear that, sweetheart? Time to come back to us." Hours passed like gentle waves. Nurses came and went. Machines hummed. And slowly, miraculously, Caleb's body fought its way toward the light again. When the sedation was finally lowered, his eyelids twitched. Then again. Melissa stood beside me, gripping the railing so hard her knuckles paled. "Come on, baby," she whispered. "Wake up." A soft groan escaped him, muffled around the breathing tube. His fingers curled slightly around mine. Then his eyes opened. Just a sliver at first, heavy and unfocused, but open. I leaned close, tears blurring my vision. "Hi, sweetheart," I breathed. His eyes fluttered, landing on me. Confusion clouded them, then recognition softened them. A single tear slid from the corner of his eye. "You're okay," I whispered. "You're safe. You made it." Melissa reached out, her voice breaking. "Caleb, I'm here too. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression fragile and tired. Then his gaze drifted back to me, like he was anchoring himself to something steady. The doctor stepped in, checking his vitals. "Good job, Caleb," she said gently. "You're doing really well. We'll keep supporting your breathing for a short while, but you're on the right track." When the tube was finally removed hours later, Caleb coughed weakly, his voice thin and raspy. The first word he managed to whisper was, "Grandma." I broke then, quietly, but completely. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe. The days that followed were slow but steady. Caleb remained in the ICU for 3 more days while the infection retreated and his strength returned. Melissa stayed most nights, sleeping in the chair beside him. She apologized. She cried. She promised things I hoped she'd keep. A social worker helped us arrange long-term medical support so he'd never have to do dialysis alone again. For once, the world felt like it was trying to help instead of hurt. When Caleb was finally moved out of ICU into a regular room, he was still pale, still weak, but he could talk, smile a little, even laugh softly when I adjusted his pillows like he was 5 years old again. One afternoon, when the room was quiet and sun warmed the blanket over his legs, he looked at me with a seriousness that didn't belong on the face of a 17-year-old boy. "Grandma," he said quietly, "am I going to die young?" The question pierced me. I took his hand carefully. "Honey, listen to me," I said. "You almost died because you were alone, because you didn't ask for help, because you thought you had to handle everything by yourself, but you're not alone anymore, not ever again. And that makes all the difference." His eyes filled. I didn't want to be a burden. I shook my head. Being alive is never a burden. He leaned his head back, tears slipping down his cheeks, and whispered, "I'm scared." I squeezed his fingers gently. "Then let us be scared with you. That's what family's for." He nodded slowly, letting the truth sink in. 2 weeks later, he came home. Not to his mother's apartment, but to my little house, the one with creaky floors and crocheted blankets, and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and old memories. We set up his dialysis supplies in the guest room. A home nurse came daily until he was strong enough to do his treatments with supervision. Melissa visited often, trying, learning, rebuilding her relationship with him, one fragile conversation at a time. Recovery wasn't easy. Some days Caleb was frustrated, tired, angry at his body for failing him. Other days he was quiet and reflective, sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the wind move through the trees. But he healed, slowly, beautifully, stubbornly. He healed. And with each passing day, I thanked God for giving him a second chance. Months later, on a crisp spring afternoon, I watched him step outside with a confidence I hadn't seen in years. He stood taller, stronger, even smiled more freely. He'd started speaking to other teens at the dialysis center, encouraging them the way he wished someone had encouraged him. He told them not to hide, not to be ashamed, not to suffer alone. And one evening, as the sun dipped low over the yard, painting everything gold, he sat beside me on the porch swing and rested his head on my shoulder just like he used to when he was little. "Thank you, Grandma," he murmured, "for saving my life." I wrapped an arm around him, tears warming my eyes. "You saved your own life," I whispered. "I just held your hand while you fought." He smiled softly, the kind of smile that heals old wounds. And as fireflies flickered in the grass and the world hummed with quiet peace, I felt something settle in my heart, something gentle and true. Families aren't perfect. We love wrong sometimes. We fail each other. We let fear make our decisions. We keep secrets because we're scared of being weak. But real love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. It's about holding someone together when they're too hurt to hold themselves. It's about second chances. And watching Caleb now, alive, growing, hopeful, I knew we'd all been given one. If this story touched your heart in any way, don't forget to take care of your health and your loved ones. Sometimes the hardest words to say are, "I need help," but those are exactly the ones that can save a life. And if stories like this speak to your heart, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another real emotional journey from this channel. I'd also love to know where you're listening from today. Drop a comment down below and tell me what part of the world you're in. Thank you for being here with me and with us.